multiple narrators, strange framing devices, breaking the fourth wall. You're now entering the Twilight Zone. Hey bookworms, welcome back to my channel and to another list, and today I will share with you my top 10 strangest books that I've ever encountered. Now the reason that I'm saying encountered and not read is because, let's face it, some of them were too much even for me. I do like a little bit of strangeness here and there, and I did give all these books a chance, but I didn't finish all of them, so there's my disclaimer. So before I start with this list, I just want to point out what exactly do I mean when I say strange books. Well, this is very personal, very intuitive, and very subjective. So these are simply books that I've read, and somewhere around reading them, I just had this thought of, wow, this is weird. That's it. So don't take it too seriously. As I said, it's very personal, very intuitive. Now, I did decide not to put books that are simply science fiction or fantasy, that like the weirdness just come from supernatural elements and stuff. And also I decided not to put crazy comedies there, like The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy or Terry Pratchett books, just because, I don't know, it didn't really fit within the kind of list that I want to make, if that makes sense. So again, disclaimers. Now I think we can go to the list in ascending order, which means that we'll start with the most regular of them all, and number one will be the weirdest thing ever. At number 10, we have an IKEA catalog. No, of course, I'm kidding. This is Horror Store by Grady Hendrix, and I actually reviewed this book. I will link all the books that I've actually reviewed down below if you want to get more detail, but the thing of the book and kind of what makes it so strange is the fact that it kind of looks like an IKEA catalog. This is no mistake. This book is about a group of workers in a shop that really is like IKEA, it just has a different name, and they're staying there overnight when strange things begin to happen. Now, the first really weird thing about this book is that this is not your usual typical haunted house narrative. But secondly, the whole build-up of the book, like a catalog, is just so unique and so cool and so creative. You do have the narrative and you have, of course, the written word, but in every beginning of a chapter, you do have a drawing of a product and a description, just as if it was a catalog. But as the book progresses and things become darker, so do the products, and from, I don't know, bed and chairs and stuff, they become torturing devices. And this is just a really cool concept that's also very unique and kind of twisty. So that's why it earned its place on the list, albeit in a low place. Don't worry, the weird things are about to come. At number 9, we have The Hippopotamus by Stephen Fry. In The Hippopotamus, we have a very annoying antagonizing protagonist called Ted Wallace, and he's a washed up poet who writes reviews for the newspaper. Anyway, he kind of like washed up, down on his luck, and he gets an undercover job to go to an old friend, or I think was it a relative, a lord in England, to go to his mansion and to pretend to be writing his biography, and that's why he's there, where in fact what he really needs to do is search for proofs for supernatural activity, because rumor has it that this lord's son has the ability to cure people and animals, even the one that are terminally ill. Now that sounds like any other sort of a fantasy, maybe not kind of a book, but unfortunately for this list, the real weirdness, I believe, is actually the ending and the solution for everything, which of course I will not share with you right now. But just trust me and trust Stephen Fry. He's British and he has a very unique imagination. At number 8, we have The End of Mr Wai by Scarlett Thomas. Oh, Scarlett. I really appreciate her imagination, but there is something really antagonizing about her books, both The End of Mr. Wai, which I kind of liked, and Popco, which I reviewed. So if you're wondering why I have this love-hate relationship with her and her books and her protagonist, just watch my Popco review. I also talked there a little bit about The End of Mr. Wai, but let's focus on Mr. Wai this time. In The End of Mr. Wai, we have a young protagonist called Ariel, and she is on the look for this lost Victorian book called The End of Mr. Wai, because if she will read it, she will find a way to do this experiment which will enable her consciousness to jump into other people's consciousness and kind of see the world from their point of view. Now, this book is, well, it's kind of strange, that's why it's on this list. It's also very interesting and very, very philosophical, which is good and bad. On one hand, they do really delve into the whole consciousness and what does it actually mean to exist, and like the connection between people that is not verbal or physical and all of that. But on the other hand, I felt like it was really overdone in some places. Like there will be a man passing by her on the street and she will start, what would Rene Descartes say? What would Plato say about that? And like, okay, yeah, we got it. You know your philosophy. Let's just move on. But basically, this is a very, very unique book and it presents some really unique ideas. So if you are into other things, unique things, strange things, which I can only assume you are if you're watching this list, then give this one a chance. At number 7, we have probably the newest book on the list. Yeah, it seems like it. And a book that I've recently reviewed. This is The 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Tartan. And I'm afraid that in order to explain what was so strange about it, I will have to go into a territory that I don't really consider spoilers, because I don't do spoilers here, but it's still something that I did not reveal in my review on the book, because I thought it would be really cool to be surprised by it. So I'm just pointing it out in case you do want to read it, which I do recommend. We do start out with a man who wakes up without his memory, and he thinks he witnessed a murder and enters a nearby home in order to get help. And from that moment, things become a little more complicated. Apparently, this man is living in some sort of a time loop. There is a party in a big mansion, a really kind of classic whodunit thing. And in the end of the party, somebody dies. So this man, our protagonist, has to do the loop again until he actually figures out who the murderer is. But it gets even more complicated, and this is the part that I didn't say in the review. Each time he does the loop, he is a different person, and he only has a limited amount of loops until he actually has to do everything from the start, which means to eradicate his memory. And to make things even weirder, apparently this is not just some sort of a weird Star Trek-y time loop. No, it's actually a form of punishment. But to whom and for what kind of crime and why? You need to read the book. This is definitely one of my favorite books on this list, and if you want to know why, watch my review. And it's a really fun book and definitely recommended for people who first like unique things, like you, because you're watching this list, but also love classic whodunits. It's a really, really interesting combination of these two genres. At number 6, we have probably the most famous book on this list, Life of Pi by Jan Martel. And this is the first book, however, not the last book on this list, that I, first of all, didn't finish, and second, didn't like. So I'm just saying that. If you don't know the Life of Pi, this is a story of a boy on a boat with a couple of animals. And if you think that's weird, imagine being on a boat with a tiger called Richard Parker and, you know, trying to survive. And you are talking to the tiger, but there is a chance that's because you haven't eaten for a while and the sun is burning above your head. So this book is weird, but it's also very allegorical. I will not tell you allegorical about what, because first off, this is not the point of the video, and secondly, I'm not really sure, especially because I haven't finished the book, how to analyze it. But suffice to say, yeah, a boy on a boat with a couple of animals, and yeah, that's weird enough to be on this list. At number 5, we have The Raw Shark Texts by Stephen Hall, another book that I reviewed, albeit a while ago. And this book starts out again with a man waking up without any memory whatsoever. I see a theme here, not to mention that my last video was a review that also started with the protagonist who wakes up without any memory, so Anyway, he soon realizes that he actually knew that this was about to happen, so he arranged to be sent letters like from himself, so he will understand what's going on. And basically, it all happened because he tried to save a person who died, and it has to do with a shark that's made of words and eats your memory. This is a really unique book, not just in theme, but also in the way that it uses this medium of book. I have it right here, let me show you. You'll have pages like this. I don't know how well you can see, but this shark is actually made of words. And as you flip through the pages, it comes near you because in that point in the book, the shark actually attacks him. Anyway, this book is definitely a mind bender, both in ideas, but also very unique in the way that it uses paper, like the pages we're reading, and letters that we're actually seeing typed instead of like experiencing a story like in real life or in movies. So extra points for uniqueness. Now let's move on to number 4. Things are starting getting dark, and number 4 is The House of Leaves by Mark Danielewski. And I know some of you were wondering, is she gonna put The House of Leaves or not? Well, of course I'm gonna put The House of Leaves in the list about strangest books. How do I even describe The House of Leaves? Like, the framing is also very complicated. It's like a story within a story, with footnotes having a very major role. But basically the story within a story focuses on a family who moves into a new house only to find out that the house is a lot bigger from the inside, and no, not in a cute TARDIS kind of a way, but in a very eerie and creepy way. They kind of keep opening doors and realizing there are a lot more behind them than they thought. But yeah, basically, if you're into weird horror and not exactly a monster coming at you, but more of like a very eerie, creepy, unsettling feeling, then you should definitely at least give House of Leaves a chance. Okay guys, we're down to the last 3 books, and these are definitely the weirdest. So at number 3 we have Johnny Mnemonic by William Gibson, which I have to say, it's not a novel, it's a short story. Here, said it. Quite frankly, I am not too certain about how to describe, because I'm not too certain about what it's about. This was a very difficult read, and this book, as well as the 2 others that I'm going to mention, I did not finish. I just want to point out, it was just too difficult for me because it's written in a very difficult language. The story, as I later found out, is about a future where people's minds can be turned into pretty much like a hard drive, and the main character, Johnny, turns his brain into a hard drive in order to transfer knowledge and memories and stuff like that. There may be a chance that I'm not being accurate. I usually do try to do some research about these things, but I do feel weird, first of all, talking about a book that I haven't finished, and secondly, it was a very difficult and strange book to read. If you like the challenge, go ahead, but I like challenges and weirdness when it comes to the plot. If the language is very strange and difficult, then it's not something that I specifically like. So I'm putting it on the list. It's definitely deserving to be in 3rd place of the top 10 weirdest book that I ever encountered. However, when it comes to the plot and stuff like that, I can't really recommend it because it was so difficult to read. So the last two were a bit difficult for me because I was really contemplating which one should be number one, which one should be number two, because I do feel that both are kind of equally weird. However, one of them was weird plot-wise and the other one is weird grammar-wise. So eventually I decided to do the following. Number two is The History of History by Ida Hattemer Higgins. I hope that I pronounced it correctly. So what this book is actually about, this is like the plot-wise weirdness. It's like bizarre, totally what the fuck am I reading kind of a book, seriously. So what do we have here? We have a young woman who I think is American, Anglo-Saxon anyway. She might be English, but she lives in Berlin, Germany, and she does tours for tourists, and she specializes in the Holocaust and Hitler. A lot of very nice history that you can experience in Berlin. And then one day she wakes up and finds out that the last 2 years of her life are gone. Again, we get to characters who lost their memories. What's going on? But wait, we're not in the weird part yet. You see, one day she wakes up and all the houses are alive. They're not made from bricks anymore. They're made of flesh and muscle, and they're breathing and they're sweating. They have pores and teeth, and they're alive, but they can talk. And then apparently she sees a bird following her, but it's not actually a bird. It's actually Magda Goebbels, the wife of Joseph Goebbels, you know, from Hitler's government. Yeah, because she follows her. And I didn't finish the book as well. I tried, I got to the middle, and then I was like, what the hell am I doing? I have better things to do with my life. This book was bizarre, and that word doesn't even begin to describe it. It was just so weird. And I understand that it's about the deteriorating mental condition of the protagonist, but it was just weird. And I didn't even get to the part where she goes to a friend's house and then she reads a book there about a people who did a play about a stranger who comes and tells them a story. So that it's like it's a story within a play, within a book, within a book. Yes. Oh my god, it is time to finish this list. We're down to number one of the most notoriously strange and probably the most difficult to read book ever. And this is, of course, Finnans Wake by James Joyce. If anyone ever told you that they read Finnans Wake, they're lying. Nobody read Finnans Wake. It is impossible to read Finnans Wake because this book is written like a freaking riddle. Sometimes you will have a seemingly normal sentence with a few words that don't make sense, but most of the time it's the grammar that doesn't make any sense, which makes this book impossible to read. There is a plot, and there are people who claim to have read this book, but I don't believe them. No, I'm kidding. I mean, there is a way to read it, but it is so difficult. I just tried 2 sentences and just couldn't understand anything. You will have words that have a meaning, and like river and Adam and Eve, but then the order will be weird, or you will have a word that if you read it out loud, you realize that it's actually an existing word just written a little differently. But for the most part, it's just so much work to read a book, and the book is about a family, I know, and like one of them dies, obviously, that's why there's a wake. But I think the concept is really cool to create an entire book that's like a riddle. But part of me also think that it doesn't really worth it. I mean, some books take a bit more of a mental effort to read, but it's not really worth it. And it occurs to me, what if Finnans Wake is like an April Fool's joke or something like that? That James Joyce just made a prank or a joke and people just pretend to read and understand it in order to sound smart. That sounds like a really great Pinky and the Brain plot, isn't it? And that's it for my list, bookworms. What do you think? Was Finnans Wake a real book all the time, or James Joyce just had a really wicked sense of humor? So guys, I really hope you enjoyed my video, and please write down below if you've read some of these books or others that you recommend that I missed somehow. If you like this video, don't forget to click like to show your support and also to subscribe to my channel. if you dare, and click the bell icon so you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video. So my fellow weird bookworms, again, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.